Admission from the government that basically every epidemiologist has been right all along. We haven't been testing enough. The Prime Minister yesterday even rolled out the WHO's test line as though it was a revelation.
Test, test, test.
Yes, indeed. And where do we heard that before? I think it was the WHO, wasn't it?
Test, test, test.
Except they said it 2 weeks ago. We have capacity to be able to do about 3,500 tests a day. Currently, we're doing a bit over 1,500. Australia does twice that. And so at last, they will widen the definition. The University of Auckland epidemiologist Simon Thornley is with us. Simon, good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
When they've argued all along, Bloomfield and Nadern, that they've been testing adequately, have they been making that up?
Well, I think there's a big question now about how widespread the disease is in the community, and we desperately need to know that. So I think widening the net is very important at the moment. Most people who are being tested fulfill this case definition of having had contact with a confirmed case. So we're getting this story that it's all about overseas travellers and there's very little community contact, but that may be an artefact of the testing regime.
And haven't we learnt that from schools and pubs around the country and weddings around the country? If you don't know the person, you can be in contact with a person, you wouldn't have the slightest idea. Therefore, if you're not tested, you'll never know.
That's right, and we know that this disease or this infection can be minimally symptomatic in younger people. So that to me suggests we desperately need to be widening the net, not just from sick people. And in Iceland, we've seen large numbers of asymptomatic people in the community positive for the test without epidemiological contacts with the case.
You wrote a very good piece yesterday, and you gave the Diamond Princess as an example. That was one of the few examples where literally everybody, a population, got tested, and the death rate turns out to be about 1% if you extrapolate it out because it's an older group of people, because it's on a cruise ship. It's about the level of the flu. If you follow that logic, are we overreacting to this?
Well, that's a good question. I think we need to be open to new evidence. What surprised me was that overall mortality rate in Europe hadn't changed much at all for what was expected for the season. So what I think is happening and why ICUs, intensive cares, are becoming full is that there's a change in the mode of death of elderly people, that instead of dying of cancer or cardiovascular disease, they're dying of this disease.
Well, are they? Are they dying of it or with it?
Well, that's a good question too. I think the question is they often have many comorbidities. That's what the case series in Italy shows. They may well be dying of a pneumonia. But the figures in the overall mortality show that overall deaths are not occurring at a rate that is unexpected for that population. So it suggests that it's not an added burden on that population.
What did you make of the modelling released by the government yesterday in comparing to World War I? Is there any sense in comparing something, a virus to a war to a virus, or having a football field full of people dying? What's the point of that?
Well, I think the overall mortality statistics in Europe cast a sceptical light on the modelling. I mean, I've heard the doomsday figures of 80,000 deaths. Other modellers have said 15,000 deaths. But what we're not hearing is that these are deaths that would occur anyway, and that overall mortality in heavily affected countries hasn't gone up. So these deaths are occurring in people who are running out of time.
Exactly. They were going to die anyway, and something was going to get them. It just happens now to have been this, or maybe it wasn't, or maybe this exacerbated it, or maybe this complicated it.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's important to consider. And a headline figure of 80,000 deaths is arresting, but that needs to be put in context with the other statistics that we know about what's going on in heavily affected countries.
Simon, appreciate your insight very much. We'll get you back. Simon Thornley, University of Auckland epidemiologist.